Analyst Institute. So we educate many students who go on to become professionally qualified and who work in the investment sector. And I hope to be meeting some of those students, not this weekend, but next weekend, when there's going to be an alumni reunion, which I've organized in Beijing. So I'm very happy to be here giving you this, this overview. And what I would like to do in the theme of experimentation and psychology is to have a little bit of interaction with you during the session. So what I would like you to do is to, if you don't already have it, download some software called Socrative Student. So it should be available to you. I have managed to log on to the Socrative.com website. The way I did it, I went through Bing, so cn.bing.com. If you then type Socrative, you should get the Socrative website, and you can then download an app called Socrative Student. And what I will do later on is I will ask you some questions, and I would like you to answer those questions using the app. It will all be anonymous, but what we'll be able to see on the screen is the answers across the group who have answered, and then what the correct answer is, if there is a correct answer, so you can see how your answers relate to or differ from those of others. I'm also aware that we have an online audience as well, so very warm welcome to those of you who are remote, who are not here on the university campus, who are attending digitally. And once again, I would encourage you to see if you can download this app called Socrative Student. And then later on, I will ask you some questions, and then we can see as a group what we think of the answers. And hopefully there'll be some learning from that experience. So once you've downloaded the app, what you need to do is you need to type in the name of a room, and my room is called Finance Lab. That's all one word. And there's nothing there yet because I haven't launched the quiz, but later on I will launch a quiz. I'll ask you some questions, and then you should be able to answer through the app. So you can discover what your thought process is relative to everyone else who's taking part in the same question and answer session. So that's coming up very soon. So what I want to talk about today is the behavior of investors. Now, I know that in China, the stock market, or the stock markets in Shenzhen and Shanghai in particular, are sometimes quite volatile. They get a bit frothy. And I think that's because there's a lot of retail interest in the stock market in China. So it's not just large institutional investors that typically dominate in many countries. But here in China, there's lots of individuals who have an interest in staking the stock market as well. And I think that creates a different and more interesting dynamic. So there is a general question in finance, which is, are stock markets efficient in the sense that the price that you see in the market is an accurate price? It gives you confidence that that's the fair price for a share. So does the price of this share embody all the information that's known about the company? If so, the market's efficient. And of course, information changes all the time, and stock prices go up and down. And the market's efficient if prices react quickly without any delay. in the correct manner to the flow of information. So there's a quite strong body of empirical evidence that stock markets are efficient, but also some evidence that there are some discrepancies. So stock markets are not efficient all the time. And one reason for that is that investors are not always rational. They don't always make decisions that are based upon cool, calm analysis. Sometimes investors act with emotion. And in such circumstances, then markets may not be as efficient as we would like them to be. So in the last 20 years in particular, there has been a lot of academic work which has investigated the impact of human psychology on financial decision making. It's an area of study which is known as behavioral finance. So according to this perspective, investors are not always rational. They're just normal human beings, but predictably normal, because there's been a lot of work on human psychology which enables us to say how people behave in particular circumstances and what biases humans are typically prone to. So predictably normal is what you can say about the behavior of investors. So sometimes mistakes are made, but they typically are repeated, so they're not one-off. And it's possible to learn from these biases, understand them, and then take account of them when we are making decisions ourselves. And that should improve our own decision-making in terms of investments. Okay, so we can adjust our expectations to take account of the known flaws and biases of human psychology. So what I'm going to do then, to begin with, is to go through some examples of mistakes that we can make arising from how we see things, visual perception. So here's a question. What do you see on the next screen? Which black dot looks bigger? On the left or on the right? Left one looks bigger, doesn't it? In actual fact, as you can just see, they are both the same size. So what this illustrates is what's known as the Ebbinghaus illusion. So this is named after a well-known German psychologist, Hermann Ebbinghaus, from the 19th century, who showed that when you change what's surrounding an image, you can alter the perception of its size relative to the equivalent image. Around about 30% of the activity of the human brain is concerned with vision, with processing what you see. So that's quite a lot of brain power. Here's another illusion, or is it? Which line looks bigger? The top or the bottom? Top one looks bigger. Is it bigger? In actual fact, those two lines are the same size. So this is another illusion named after another German psychologist, Franz Karl Müller-Lyer. So he was the person that popularized this other way of demonstrating that individuals can become prone to see things as different sizes when they're the same size, because of course the arrows are inverted and it gives you a different perception of the length of the line, even though both are, as we can see, the same. So here are two tables. Which table looks longer? The one on the left, okay. So is it longer? Oh, it's the same size. So what you have there is looking at the same table from two different perspectives. And therefore, your eye sees one table as being longer, where, as we can see in reality, it's actually the same table. So the way in which an image is presented relative to another can create distortion of perception. Here's another example. So there's a road leading into the distance, and there's a couple of lines there imposed on the road. Which line looks bigger? Top or the bottom? Top one. Is it bigger? In actual fact, the lines are the same. So your brain has been lulled into thinking that the top line is bigger because of what you see surrounding. What you see is a road leading into the distance. It could well be a railway line as well. And that once again gives rise to a distortion of perception. So this is known as the Ponzo illusion. This is an Italian psychologist, Mario Ponzo, who came up with this example of distortion of perception. What do you see here? You see a grid, some white lines with a black background. What do you see at the intersections? What do you see here? Do you see a gray blob appearing at those intersections? So if you look at the whole image, you see that there are gray blobs at those intersections. So what I want you to do now is focus on one particular intersection. Look at that one closely. Is the gray blob there? Look at this one. Do you see the gray blob? This one? Is the gray blob there? So if you focus on a particular intersection, you can't see that gray blob. And the reason for that is that the gray blob doesn't exist. Your brain has made it up to cope with what it sees. So your brain can manufacture something that doesn't actually exist, as you've just witnessed. So that's known as the Hermann grid illusion. So Ludemar Hermann was the person who came up with this example. Here's another example of a grid illusion called the scintillating grid illusion. So looking at the grid overall, what do you see? You see blobs coming and going at each of those intersections. But once again, focus on a particular intersection, this one, or this one, or that one. And what do you see now? You see a white circle, because each intersection has a white circle. Not a grey circle, not a circle that changes, permanent white circle at each intersection. But our human brain can't cope with all of that information. And therefore you see changing blobs when you look at the entire image. So the point here is that the brain can trick us into seeing things that actually don't exist. So what do you see here? What is this? Have a careful look. What do you see? Achor, duck. Very popular dish in this part of the world. Duck looking the other way. Or maybe it's a rabbit. Oh, could be a rabbit. Or it could be a duck. Could be both. And when you look at the image, first of all, it's going to be either a rabbit or a duck. And now that you know it can be both, you can't quite work out which one it actually is. Because it can be either. Here's an image of the moon. Okay, so we all look up at the sky at night and we see the moon. It's a common feature that everyone on the planet sees. And what do you see when you look at the moon here? Maybe you can see a face, so-called man on the moon. There's an image there of a human face, if you think about it. And this is an example of what psychologists call pareidolia, which is seeing something and then imagining that it's something else. So if you look up at the sky on a nice summer's day and you look at clouds, sometimes you see a pattern in the clouds and you imagine that the clouds are a particular shape. They form some image that's familiar to you. So here we have a man in the moon. That's an image from the northern hemisphere, and it's something that Europeans would typically see. Here's another image of the moon from a different part of the world. Okay, so where you are geographically dictates typically how you perceive the moon. If you look at it closely through binoculars, rather than just think of it as some circle up on the sky. The moon was very clear last night, actually. I was looking at it, and Venus is just below the moon at the moment in the early evening. So in this part of the world, the moon is said to resemble a rabbit. Okay, so your pareidolia, your image perception, is to an extent dependent upon culture and location. So the first man on the moon was Neil Armstrong in 1969. He and Buzz Aldrin landed in the Sea of Tranquility. And the Sea of Tranquility is just about there, not very far from the Eye of the Rabbit. So location, geography, culture can affect our perceptions as well in terms of what we think we see. What do you see there? What's the image that first hits you? Do you see a girl's head?